Captain Taemin Choi stood on the bridge of the warship Indomitable, watching the stars through the viewport. His ship was one of 12 human vessels patrolling the outer rim, far from Earth and far from the chaos that had consumed the galaxy. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray hair at his temples, earned from 20 years of service. The bridge hummed quietly around him, his crew working at their stations with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Hannah Park sat at the tactical console, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. She was younger than Taemin, sharp-minded and always 3 steps ahead in any situation. Next to her, young Ensign Kyung worked the communication station, his face still carrying the softness of someone fresh from the academy. The silence on the bridge broke when Kyung's console beeped urgently. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth," Kyung said, his voice uncertain. "It's marked as Council Emergency Protocol." Taemin felt his stomach tighten. The Galactic Council only used that protocol for matters of war and survival. "Put it through." The main view screen flickered to life, showing Ambassador Minho Kim's face. The ambassador looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His usual composed expression was gone, replaced by something that looked like defeat. "Captain Choi," Minho began, his voice heavy, "the Galactic Council has made a decision regarding the Vrexian threat." He paused, and in that pause Taemin knew what was coming. The Council has voted to accept the Vrexian terms of surrender. All member species are ordered to stand down their military forces immediately. This includes Earth and all human vessels. The bridge went silent. Even the normal hum of the ship's system seemed to fade away. "Stand down?" Hannah said quietly, her hands frozen above her console. "Sir, they can't be serious." Minho's image on the screen looked directly at Taemin. The vote was 11-1. I stood alone in opposition, but we were outvoted. The Council believes that surrender is the only way to preserve our species. The Vrexians have destroyed 3 Council fleets. They've burned entire worlds. The Council has decided that resistance will only lead to extinction. Taemin stepped closer to the screen. "What are the terms of this surrender?" "Complete disarmament," Minho said, each word seeming to pain him. "All military vessels will be decommissioned. All weapons research will cease. The Vrexians will occupy Council space and govern all member species. We will be subjects of their empire." "Slaves," Taemin said flatly. "They want us to become slaves." "The Council calls it survival," Minho replied. "They say we can live under Vrexian rule. They say our cultures will be preserved. Our people will survive. But yes, Captain, we will not be free." Hannah pulled up data on her tactical screen. "Captain, I'm looking at the battle reports from the last 3 engagements. The Vrexians have superior numbers and technology, but their tactics are predictable. They rely on overwhelming force. If we use guerrilla strategies, hit-and-run attacks—" "Against how many ships, Lieutenant?" Kyung interrupted, his voice shaking. "The reports say they have thousands of vessels. We have barely 300 ships in the entire human fleet." "Then we build more," Hannah shot back. "With what time?" Kyung countered. "They're already at the border of Council space. The other species have already started deactivating their weapons." Taemin held up his hand, silencing the argument. He looked back at Minho on the screen. "What does Earth Command say?" Minho's expression shifted, showing something that might have been hope. "Earth Command is divided. Some admirals support the Council's decision. They say we're too young a species to fight this war, that we've only been in space for 100 years while other species have had millennia to advance. But others," he paused, "others say that humanity didn't come this far by accepting defeat. Admiral Yuna Shin is among them." Taemin knew Yuna well. She had been his mentor, the one who taught him that sometimes the right decision wasn't the safe one. "The Council has given all species 48 hours to comply with the stand-down order," Minho continued. "After that, any military vessel still active will be considered in violation of the surrender terms. The Vrexians have promised to destroy any ship that refuses to power down its weapons. So we have 48 hours to decide if we want to live as free people or as subjects," Taemin said. "Captain," Minho said carefully, "I need you to understand something. If you refuse this order, you won't just be defying the Council. You'll be committing humanity to a war we may not survive. Earth will stand behind whatever decision our fleet commanders make. But the weight of that choice falls on officers like you." Taemin looked around his bridge, at Hannah, who was already calculating attack patterns on her console, at Kyung, who looked terrified but hadn't suggested they surrender, At his crew, men and women who had trusted him with their lives. Understood, Ambassador, Taman said. We'll need time to discuss this with the other ship captains in our patrol group. Minho nodded. I'll be here if you need to reach me. Whatever you decide, Captain, know that Earth is proud of all of you. The transmission ended. Taman stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the blank screen. Then he turned to face his crew. Every eye was on him. Kyung, he said, open a channel to all ships in our patrol group. I want every captain on this call in 10 minutes. Yes, sir, Kyung said, his fingers flying across his console. Hana approached Taman, speaking quietly so only he could hear. Captain, I've been running the numbers. If we fight even with perfect tactics and complete surprise, our survival chances are less than 5%. I know, Taman said. But if we surrender, Hana continued, we'll be giving up everything humanity has worked for, everything we've built. I know that too. So what do we do? Taman looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, the Vrexian fleet was moving through space, confident in their victory. The other Council species were already powering down their weapons, accepting their fate. It would be so easy to do the same. To go home, to see Earth one more time, to live out whatever life the Vrexians would allow them. But then what? What kind of life would that be? What would they tell the next generation? That when faced with tyranny, humanity had chosen comfort over freedom? Captain, Kyung called out. All ships are ready for the conference call. Taman straightened his uniform. Put them through. 11 faces appeared on the screen, the captains of the other human ships in the patrol group. They all looked as tired and conflicted as Taman felt. You've all received the surrender order, Taman said without preamble. You all know what it means. So I'm going to ask you a simple question, and I want honest answers. He paused, looking at each face on the screen. Who here wants to live on their knees? The silence stretched for several seconds. Then one by one the captains began to shake their heads. Not a single one spoke in favor of surrender. I didn't think so, Taman said, feeling something solid settle in his chest. It wasn't quite hope. Hope was too fragile for what was coming. It was something stronger. It was certainty. Then I guess we're going to war, he said. On the bridge of the Indomitable, alarms began to sound as the ship powered up its weapon systems. Around them, 11 other human ships did the same, their running lights blazing defiantly in the darkness of space. They were alone. They were outnumbered. They would likely die, but they would die free. And in that moment, that was enough. The message from Earth arrived 3 days after Taman's fleet had refused the surrender order. Admiral Yuna Shin appeared on the view screen, and Taman could see the command center of Earth's defense fleet behind her. Officers rushed back and forth preparing for war. Captain Choi, Yuna said, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. Earth has officially rejected the Council's surrender terms. We're the only species that has done so. The other Council members are calling us reckless. Some are calling us insane. Maybe we are, Taman replied. What's the Vrexian response? They're angry, Yuna said with a thin smile. Apparently they expected universal compliance. They've redirected a fleet toward human space. 237 ships, according to our scouts. They're 3 weeks out from your position. Hana looked up from her tactical console, her face pale. Captain, we have 12 ships. I'm aware, Lieutenant, Yuna continued. I'm assembling a reinforcement fleet, but it will take time to mobilize. We're pulling ships from patrol routes, from training exercises, from anywhere we can. But, Captain, I need you to buy us time. Can you do that? Taman looked at the star map on his display. The Vrexian fleet was a massive red cluster moving toward them like a tidal wave. His 12 ships were barely visible in comparison, tiny blue dots against the darkness. How much time do you need? He asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4. You'll have it. Yuna's expression softened slightly. Taman, you don't have to die out there. You can fall back, regroup with... If we fall back, they'll reach the colonies, Taman interrupted. New Seoul, Busan Station, the mining facilities in the asteroid belt. Those people can't evacuate in 3 weeks. Someone has to slow the Vrexians down. Someone, Yuna said quietly. Not necessarily you. Yes, Taman said. Necessarily us. We made this choice, Admiral. We'll see it through. After the transmission ended, Chief Engineer Daewon Lee called from the engine room. His face appeared on a smaller screen, smudged with grease and sweat. Captain, I've been reviewing our supply situation, Daewon said. If we're going into sustained combat, we're going to run into problems. We were supposed to resupply at Outpost Gamma 3 days ago. What kind of problems? The kind where our guns stop shooting and our engines stop running, Day-Wan said bluntly. I can stretch our resources, jury-rig some systems, but you need to understand that every shot we fire, every jump we make, brings us closer to dead in the water. How long can you keep us fighting? Day-Wan thought for a moment. With 12 ships and the supplies we have, if we're careful, maybe 2 weeks. If we're not careful, maybe 3 days. Make it 3 weeks, Captain, I just told you. I know what you told me, Taman said, and I'm telling you we need 3 weeks. Find a way. Day-Wan stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I'll find a way. The first encounter with the Vrexian fleet happened 6 days later. Taman had positioned his ships in an asteroid field, using the rocks for cover. The Vrexians arrived in a tight formation, their ships massive and powerful, each one twice the size of the Indomitable. They're scanning the asteroid field, Hana reported. They know we're here. Let them look, Taman said. Kyung, send the signal to the other ships. Attack pattern Delta 7. The 12 human ships erupted from the asteroid field like angry hornets from a nest. They came in fast and low, their smaller size allowing them to weave between the asteroids. The Vrexian ships tried to adjust their formation, but they were too big, too slow. The humans struck hard and fast. Missiles streaked across space, slamming into Vrexian shields. Energy weapons carved burning lines across alien hulls. For 10 minutes, the human fleet tore through the enemy formation, targeting engines and weapon systems. Then, just as the Vrexians began to coordinate their counterattack, the human ships vanished back into the asteroid field. Damage report, Taman called out as the Indomitable raced through the rocks. Minor hull damage on decks 7 and 8, Hana reported. Shields at 60%. All weapons functional. Enemy casualties, 5 Vrexian ships destroyed, 8 damaged. 5 ships. They had destroyed 5 enemy vessels and damaged 8 more. But the Vrexian fleet still had over 200 ships left. It was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, Taman's fleet became a nightmare for the Vrexians. They would strike from the darkness, hit hard, and disappear before the enemy could respond. They used every trick Taman had learned in 20 years of service. They hid in nebulas behind planets in the shadow of dead stars. They targeted supply ships and communication relays. They attacked and vanished again and again, but the cost was terrible. The destroyer Morning Light took a direct hit to its reactor and exploded, killing all hands. The frigate Defiant was caught in a crossfire and torn apart. The corvette Swift Justice ran out of fuel during a retreat and was destroyed while drifting helplessly. One by one, Taman's fleet was dying. On the 18th day, only 3 human ships remained, the Indomitable, the cruiser Resolute, and the frigate Guardian. They floated in the shadow of a gas giant, running on minimal power to avoid detection. Taman sat in his captain's chair, looking at the casualty reports. So many names, so many people who had trusted him to lead them. Hana approached quietly. Captain, I've been monitoring Vrexian communications. They've lost 47 ships to our attacks. Their fleet commander is furious. 47, Taman repeated. It seemed like such a small number against 200, but it was 47 ships that couldn't attack Earth. 47 ships that wouldn't threaten the colonies. There's more, Hana said. They're offering us one final chance to surrender. If we power down our weapons and submit, they'll spare our lives. And if we refuse, they're sending their entire remaining fleet to destroy us. No more chasing us around. They're going to hunt us down and end this. Taman looked at his bridge crew. Kyung was slumped at his station, exhausted. Day-Wan had been working non-stop in engineering, keeping the ship running on spare parts and hope. His crew had followed him into hell without hesitation. Kyung, Taman said, open a channel to the Vrexian fleet commander. The view screen flickered, showing a massive alien. The Vrexian was covered in dark scales with 4 eyes that burned with anger. When it spoke, its voice was translated by the computer into flat, emotionless human speech. Human vessel, the Vrexian commander said. You have fought well, but this ends now. Surrender, and your species will be allowed to serve the Empire. Refuse, and you will be destroyed. Taman stood slowly from his chair. He was aware of every eye on the bridge watching him. He thought about Earth, about the people waiting there for news. He thought about Admiral Yuna, racing to reach them with reinforcements. He thought about all the humans who had died following his orders. Then he thought about what surrender would mean. living under Vrexian rule, always wondering if this fight had mattered, always wondering if they could have held on just a little longer. "This is Captain Taemin Choi of the human warship Indomitable," he said clearly. "Here's my response to your offer." He nodded to Hana, who pressed a button on her console. On the edge of the solar system, the crippled wreck of the frigate Defiant, which the Vrexians had destroyed 3 days ago, suddenly roared to life. Daewon had secretly installed a remote piloting system before it was abandoned. Now, powered by its last reserves of fuel, the Defiant accelerated toward the Vrexian flagship. The Vrexians tried to shoot it down, but the Defiant was already too close. It slammed into the flagship at full speed, its reactor detonating on impact. The explosion was massive, bright enough to light up the gas giant's atmosphere. When the light faded, the Vrexian flagship was gone. "That's humanity's answer," Taemin said to the stunned silence on the viewscreen. "We don't surrender, we don't quit, and we definitely don't serve." The transmission cut off and alarms immediately began wailing across the Indomitable. "Vrexian fleet is moving," Hana reported, her voice tense. "All remaining ships are converging on our position. How long until they reach us?" 3 hours. "And how long until Admiral Yuna's reinforcements arrive?" Hana checked her console, and for the first time in weeks, Taemin saw her smile. 3 days, Captain. We just need to survive 3 more days." Taemin looked at his crew, at their exhausted faces and determined eyes. 3 days. It might as well have been 3 years. But they had made it this far. They had held back an army with just 12 ships. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not break. "Then let's give them 3 days, Taemin said. "All power to engines. It's time to run." The Indomitable's engines flared to life and the hunt began again. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the humans fight. The battle feeds were supposed to be restricted, classified as Council security data. But someone had leaked them, and now the images spread from world to world, from species to species. On the planet Velros Prime, Counselor Varix watched the tactical displays in his private chambers. He was a tall being covered in green scales with eyes that could see in multiple spectrums. He had voted for surrender 3 weeks ago, convinced it was the logical choice. Now he watched 3 human ships dodge and weave through an asteroid field, pursued by over 100 Vrexian vessels. Madness, he whispered to himself, but he couldn't look away. The human ship called the Indomitable led the chase, its hull scarred and burned from countless battles. Behind it, the Vrexians fired again and again. But the human ship moved like a dancer, spinning between the asteroids with impossible precision. Then the Indomitable did something that made Varix lean forward in shock. Instead of running, it turned and accelerated directly toward the pursuing Vrexian ships. Every tactical instinct said this was suicide. But as the human ship charged forward, the asteroids behind it exploded. The humans had mined the field. 6 Vrexian ships vanished in the explosions. The others scattered, and in that moment of chaos, the 3 human vessels slipped away into the darkness. Varix reached for his communication device and requested a secure channel to Earth's ambassador. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Minho Kim hadn't slept in 3 days. He stood in the command center, watching the same battle feeds that the rest of the galaxy was watching. Every time he saw the Indomitable take a hit, every time a Vrexian ship fired, he felt his heart stop. These were his people out there, dying in the darkness of space. His assistant approached with a data pad. "Sir, we're receiving communication requests from 17 different council species. They want to discuss the human resistance. Tell them we're busy fighting a war," Minho said tiredly. "Sir, one of them is Counselor Varix." Minho turned. Varix had been one of the loudest voices calling for surrender. "Put him through." Varix's scaled face appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Kim, I have been watching your people fight." "And?" Minho said, his voice flat. "I voted for surrender because I believed it was the only rational choice," Varix said slowly. "The mathematics were clear. The Vrexians had superior numbers, superior technology. Fighting them was illogical. Is there a point to this call, Counselor?" "The point," Varix said, "is that I was wrong. Not about the mathematics, those are still correct. But about what matters in war. Your people are teaching the galaxy something we had forgotten, that some things are worth dying for." Minho felt something shift in his chest. "Counselor, are you saying—" I am saying that several council members are beginning to question our decision, Varix interrupted. Quietly, carefully, because the surrender treaty forbids it. But we are watching, Ambassador. The whole galaxy is watching, and what we see is making us ashamed. After the call ended, Minho allowed himself a moment of hope. It was a small thing, fragile as glass, but it was there. In deep space, the Indomitable and her 2 companion ships raced through a debris field left over from an ancient battle. Captain Taman sat in his command chair, listening to Daewon's damage report. The port engine is running at 40% efficiency, Daewon said through the comm. We've got hull breaches on 5 decks. The shield generator is cycling on and off. And Captain, we're almost out of ammunition for the main guns. How much do we have left? Maybe 3 good volleys. After that, we're down to point defense weapons and harsh language. Taman almost smiled. After 3 weeks of running and fighting, his engineer could still make jokes. What about the other ships? The Resolute is in better shape than us, but not by much. The Guardian... Daewon paused. The Guardian is barely holding together. 1 more fight and she's done. Captain, Hana called out from the tactical station. I'm picking up something on long-range sensors. It's... She stopped, checking her readings again. Sir, it's a fleet. Human signature. It's Admiral Yuna. The bridge erupted in cheers. Kyung actually stood up from his station, tears streaming down his face. Even Taman felt his throat tighten. They had made it. 3 days of running, of fighting, of barely surviving, but they had made it. Open a channel, Taman ordered. Admiral Yuna appeared on the screen, and Taman was struck by how old she looked. The war had aged her just as it had aged everyone. Sorry we're late, Captain, Yuna said. Taman laughed, surprising himself. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed. Right on time, Admiral. We kept them busy for you. I can see that. What's your status? 3 ships, minimal ammunition, shields barely functional. But we're still here. That's more than most would have managed, Yuna said. Her expression grew serious. Taman, I'm bringing 47 ships. It's everything Earth could spare. We're still outnumbered, but not as badly as you were. It'll be enough, Taman said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. Behind the Admiral, Taman could see other ships appearing from hyperspace. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, even some old patrol boats that should have been retired years ago. Earth had scraped together every vessel it could find. There's something else, Yuna said. We have a scientist with us, Dr. Yoonji Beck. She's been studying the Vrexian technology from the ships you destroyed. She thinks she's found a weakness. What kind of weakness? A new face appeared on the screen. A young woman with tired eyes and excited energy. Captain Choi, I'm Dr. Beck. The Vrexians use a shield frequency that makes them nearly impervious to conventional weapons. But their shields all operate on the same frequency band. If we can generate a pulse at the exact right counter frequency, we can collapse their shields entirely. Can you build this weapon? Taman asked. I already have, Yoonji said, smiling. The prototype is installed on the experimental ship Relentless. But I need time to manufacture more, at least 3 days to equip the entire fleet. 3 days. Always 3 more days. Then we'll buy you 3 days, Taman said. The combined human fleet of 50 ships turned to face the Vrexian armada. On the bridge of the Vrexian command ship, Supreme Commander Thulrax studied the tactical display with growing unease. The humans had reinforcements. That was unexpected. Thulrax had been certain that the other human forces would stay near their homeworld, protecting it. But here they were, 50 ships against his remaining 176 vessels. Still, the advantage was his. He had superior numbers, superior firepower. The humans were brave, he would give them that. But bravery didn't stop plasma cannons. All ships, Thulrax commanded. Attack formation. Destroy them. The Vrexian fleet advanced like a wall of metal and fire. The human fleet didn't run this time. Instead, they accelerated forward, meeting the Vrexians head-on. The battle that followed was brutal. Ships exploded on both sides, turning into brief stars before fading into darkness. The humans fought with a desperation born of having nothing left to lose. They rammed damaged ships into Vrexian vessels. They detonated their own reactors when surrounded. They fought with a ferocity that shocked even Thulrax. And slowly, impossibly, they began to push the Vrexians back. On the Indomitable's bridge, Taman coordinated the fleet's movements while Hana called out target priorities. The ship shook with each hit it took, but it kept fighting. Captain, Kyung called out, I'm receiving transmissions from the Vrexian fleet. They're offering to negotiate, Taman's head snapped around. What? They want to discuss terms. They're asking for a ceasefire. For a moment, Taman couldn't process what he was hearing. The Vrexians, who had destroyed entire worlds, who had forced the Galactic Council to surrender, were asking to negotiate? Admiral Yuna is responding, Kyung continued. She's accepting the ceasefire. The battle slowed, then stopped. The two fleets hung in space, watching each other warily. Why? Hana asked quietly. Why would they stop now? Taman looked at the tactical display, at the burning wrecks of ships from both sides. The humans had lost 8 vessels in the engagement. The Vrexians had lost 19. The Vrexians were winning, but they were bleeding for it. And perhaps for the first time they were realizing that conquering humanity would cost more than they were willing to pay. Because, Taman said slowly, they're learning what we've known all along, that some prey becomes predator when cornered. Across the galaxy, Counselor Varix watched the battle freeze on his screen. The human fleet had held. Against all odds, against all logic, they had held. He reached for his communication device again, but this time, he wasn't calling Ambassador Minho. He was calling other council members, the ones he knew were also watching, also questioning their surrender. It's time, Varix said when they answered. It's time we remembered what it means to be free. On Earth, Minho received reports of secret communication spreading through the council. 4 species were quietly mobilizing their fleets. 6 others were sending intelligence data to human forces. The council was fracturing, split between those who chose chains and those who remembered dignity. The war wasn't over, but for the first time since it began, humanity wasn't fighting alone. And in the depths of space, on a ship held together by determination and desperation, Captain Taman Choi looked at his crew and saw something he hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. Dr. Yunji Beck stood in the weapons lab aboard the Relentless, staring at her creation with satisfaction mixed with fear. The device was smaller than she expected, no bigger than a storage container. But the power it contained could change the war. Run the simulation one more time, she told her assistant. The holographic display showed the test results. When the frequency pulse hit Vrexian shields, they collapsed like paper and fire. Complete shield failure in 2.3 seconds. Every single time. Dr. Beck, her assistant said nervously. What if the Vrexians adapt? They could change their shield frequency. They could, Yunji agreed. But it would take time to modify every ship in their fleet. And their shields are built into their ship cores. Changing the frequency means practically rebuilding each vessel. We'll have a window, hopefully a big enough one. Captain Sungmin Han entered the lab, a stocky man with careful eyes. He commanded the Relentless, the experimental warship that would carry the first frequency weapon into battle. Dr. Beck, Admiral Yuna wants a status report. We're ready, Yunji said. The weapon is stable. The other ships can be equipped within 2 days. Then we go to war in 2 days, Sungmin said simply. But Supreme Commander Thulrax didn't give them 2 days. The Vrexian fleet attacked 18 hours later, catching the human forces during the middle of the retrofitting process. Only 10 human ships had been equipped with the new weapon, including the Relentless. All ships, Admiral Yuna commanded over the fleet channel, engage at will. Vessels with frequency weapons, you are weapons free. Show them what humans do when we stop playing defense. The Relentless charged forward, Sungmin at the helm. When they came into range of the Vrexian ships, Yunji activated her weapon. The pulse was invisible to the naked eye, but its effect was immediate. The shields on 5 Vrexian cruisers simply vanished. For a moment, the enemy ships hung in space, naked and vulnerable. Then the other human ships opened fire. Without shields, the Vrexian ships were torn apart. Missiles and energy beams ripped through their hulls. In less than a minute, all 5 ships were destroyed. On the bridge of his command ship, Thulrax watched in shock. His shields, the technology that had made the Vrexian Empire unstoppable, had simply stopped working. Analyze what happened, he commanded his tactical officer. Now, but there was no time. More Vrexian ships lost their shields as the human vessels equipped with the frequency weapon spread out through the battle space. The tide of the engagement shifted rapidly. Taman watched from the Indomitable as the battle transformed. The Vrexians, who had fought with absolute confidence in their superiority, suddenly hesitated. Their formations broke apart as ships tried to maneuver away from the human vessels with the new weapon. They're scared, Hana said with wonder in her voice. Captain, the Vrexians are actually scared. Good, Taman replied. It's about time they learned what fear feels like. The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, 23 Vrexian ships were destroyed and another 41 were damaged. The human fleet had lost 4 ships, but for the first time they had dealt more damage than they received. When the Vrexian fleet retreated, Taman knew the war had fundamentally changed. The hunters had become the hunted. 3 days later, Admiral Una proposed something that made half the fleet's captains think she had lost her mind. She wanted to capture a Vrexian ship. If we can board one of their vessels and access their command network, Una explained during the strategy meeting, we'll have their entire fleet deployment, their supply lines, their communication codes, everything. Admiral, one of the other captains objected, we barely know how to fight their ships from the outside. You want us to go inside one? Yes, Una said firmly. Captain Taman, your Marines are the most experienced combat unit in the fleet. Can they do this? Taman thought about his Marine commander, Private Ji-Won Yoon. She was young but fierce, with a tactical mind that impressed even Hana. They can do it, he said, but they'll need support. You'll have it, Una promised. The target was a damaged Vrexian cruiser that had fallen behind during their retreat. It still had power and weapons, but its engines were crippled. Perfect for a boarding action. Ji-Won gathered her team of 30 Marines in the Indomitable's launch bay. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room. Listen up, she said. We've been fighting these aliens for a month from the outside. Now we get to meet them face to face. Our job is simple. Get inside, secure the command center, and hold it long enough for Lieutenant Hana to hack their systems. Questions? One of the Marines raised his hand. Ma'am, do we know what Vrexians look like up close? Big, scaly, and angry, Ji-Won said. About twice our size and 3 times as mean. But they bleed just like anything else. Remember your training. Watch your corners and keep each other alive. The boarding craft launched from the Indomitable, streaking across space toward the crippled Vrexian cruiser. Other human ships provided covering fire, keeping the rest of the Vrexian fleet at bay. The craft slammed into the Vrexian hull, cutting torches burning through the metal. Ji-Won was the first through the breach, her rifle up and ready. The interior of the Vrexian ship was built for creatures much larger than humans. The corridors were tall and wide, lit by a red glow that made everything look like it was covered in blood. The air was hot and thick, making it hard to breathe. Move, Ji-Won commanded, and her team flowed forward. They encountered the first Vrexians 2 corridors in. The aliens were massive, covered in dark scales like armor with 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. They carried weapons that looked like they could punch holes in ship hulls. But the Vrexians weren't prepared for humans in close quarters. Ji-Won's team moved fast, using their smaller size to dodge and weave. They threw grenades that exploded with blinding light, then fired on the disoriented aliens. The Vrexians were tough, but concentrated fire brought them down. Keep moving, Ji-Won shouted over the sound of gunfire. We don't stop until we reach the command center. The battle through the ship's corridors was brutal. The Vrexians had the advantage of size and strength. One Marine was grabbed by a Vrexian warrior and thrown into a wall hard enough to break bones. Another was caught by weapons fire that burned through his armor. But the humans had something the Vrexians didn't expect. They were angry. Every dead friend, every destroyed colony, every moment of running and hiding fueled them. They pushed forward with a fury that shocked their enemies. Ji-Won kicked open the door to the command center and rolled inside, firing as she moved. The Vrexian officers inside reached for weapons, but they were too slow. Within seconds, the command center was secured. Lieutenant Hana, we're in position, Ji-Won reported through her comm. But we've got movement in the corridors. Lots of movement. They're counterattacking. Hold them, Hana's voice came back. I need 5 minutes. We'll give you 10, Ji-Won said, though she wasn't sure if that was possible. The Vrexians came in waves, trying to retake their command center. Ji-Won's Marines set up defensive positions using the doorways as choke points. They fired until their weapons overheated, then kept firing anyway. Ji-Won, one of her Marines called out. We're running out of ammunition. Then fix bayonets, Ji-Won replied, checking her own ammo counter.
She had 12 rounds left.
12 rounds, and then it would be hand-to-hand combat against aliens twice her size. She smiled grimly. Let them come. The Vrexians charged the command center, roaring in their alien language. Ji-Won met them at the doorway, firing her last rounds into the lead warrior. When her weapon clicked empty, she dropped it and drew her combat knife. A Vrexian swung at her with its clawed hand. She ducked under the strike and slashed at its leg, looking for weak points in the scales. The alien howled in pain. Around her, her Marines fought with the same desperate courage. They were outnumbered and outmatched, but they refused to break. Every meter the Vrexians gained cost them dearly. Got it. Hana's voice suddenly shouted through the comm. I'm in their system. Downloading now. How long? Jiwan gasped, blocking another attack. 30 seconds. We don't have 30 seconds. Another Marine yelled, but they held. Wounded, exhausted, almost out of ammunition, they held the line. When Hana finally transmitted the download complete signal, Jiwan's team had been pushed back to the command center's inner chamber. Extraction craft is on approach. Taemin's voice came through. Get out of there, Private. Jiwan grabbed the nearest Marine and started pulling her team back toward the breach point. The Vrexians pursued, but now they were more cautious, having learned to respect human ferocity. The extraction was messy and close. 2 more Marines were lost on the way out, cut down by Vrexian fire, but the rest made it to the boarding craft, which tore away from the Vrexian ship and raced back to the Indomitable. Jiwan collapsed in the launch bay, breathing hard. She had started the mission with 30 Marines. She was returning with 23, but they had the Vrexian command network. On the bridge, Hana worked through the stolen data with barely contained excitement. Captain, I have their complete fleet deployment. Supply routes, communication protocols, command structure. It's all here. Admiral Yuna's face appeared on the view screen. Lieutenant, what am I looking at? Everything, Admiral, Hana replied. The entire Vrexian war machine. And Captain Taemin, you need to see this. Their fleet. Fleet Admiral Jae-sung Kang stood in Earth's orbital command center, looking at the holographic display that showed the entire known galaxy. Red markers indicated Vrexian positions. Blue markers showed Allied forces. For the first time in months, there was more blue than red. Admiral, his aide said, the Talvex fleet has arrived in Sector 7. The Mordani ships are holding position near the nebula as ordered, and the Kelrath are requesting permission to join the advance fleet. Jae-sung nodded. 4 alien species had joined humanity's fight, their governments officially rejecting the Council's surrender. 3 more were providing support secretly, sending supplies and intelligence. The galaxy was waking up. What's the status of Captain Choi's fleet? Jae-sung asked. The Indomitable has completed repairs. Captain Choi reports his ship is ready for combat operations. Jae-sung smiled slightly. Of course, Taemin was ready. That man would probably fly into battle in a life pod if that's all he had left. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Taemin walked through his ship, inspecting the repairs. The vessel barely looked like the same ship that had left Earth months ago. Entire sections had been rebuilt, patched with metal from destroyed Vrexian vessels. Daewon called it the galaxy's ugliest warship. Taemin called it beautiful. Captain, Hana called from the tactical station. We're receiving deployment orders from Fleet Admiral Jae-sung. Taemin returned to the bridge and read the orders. The plan was ambitious, some might say insane. A coordinated strike on 12 Vrexian supply depots simultaneously, followed by a direct assault on their main fleet staging area. If it worked, it would cripple the Vrexian war machine. If it failed, the Allied fleet would be destroyed. Send a message to all ships, Taemin said. Prepare for hyperspace jump. We're going hunting. The Indomitable wasn't alone anymore. Around it flew 30 other human vessels plus ships from the 4 Allied species. It was a proper battle fleet, strong and ready. But across the galaxy, the Vrexian response was being coordinated by Supreme Commander Thulrax. He had been humiliated by the humans. His fleet had been beaten, his ships captured, his secrets stolen. Now he would make them pay. Gather the entire fleet at the homeworld, Thulrax commanded. Every ship, every weapon. We will make a stand that will be remembered for 1,000 years. The humans want war, we will give them war. The Vrexian homeworld was a harsh planet covered in red deserts and black mountains. In orbit around it, Thulrax assembled over 400 warships, the largest fleet the Vrexians had ever gathered in one place. It was a trap, and he was confident the humans would walk right into it. He was right. Fleet Admiral Jae-sung studied the intelligence reports. The Vrexians had pulled back their entire fleet to defend their homeworld. It left their conquered territory vulnerable, but it also meant facing the entire Vrexian military in one battle. It's a trap, Admiral Yuna said from her ship. Thulrax is betting everything on one engagement, So are we, Jae-sung replied. Send the order. All fleets converge on the Vrexian homeworld. The Allied fleet that emerged from hyperspace was the largest gathering of military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. 200 human ships, 150 vessels from the 4 Allied species, all moving in coordinated formation toward the Vrexian defense line. Taemin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the Vrexian fleet grow larger on his view screen. So many ships. Even with their allies, the humans were still outnumbered. Captain, Kyung said nervously, we're being hailed by the Vrexian flagship. It's Thulrax himself. Put him through. The massive Vrexian commander appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes burning with hatred. Human, Thulrax said, his translated voice dripping with contempt. You have fought well. You have killed many of my warriors. But this ends today. Here at my homeworld, your resistance dies. Maybe, Taemin said calmly. Or maybe your empire dies. Let's find out. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations. The Vrexians attacked in organized waves, using their numerical advantage to try to overwhelm the Allied fleet. But the humans and their allies fought with the tactics learned from months of desperate combat. The Allied fleet split into smaller groups, each one moving independently but coordinated through Hana's tactical network. They didn't try to match the Vrexians ship for ship. Instead, they targeted weak points, exploited gaps in formation, used the frequency weapons to strip shields, and then concentrated fire to destroy the helpless ships. Warrant Officer Hyun Woo. Song led a fighter wing of 30 small craft into the heart of the Vrexian formation. His mission was to target the enemy fleet's command ship, a massive vessel that coordinated the Vrexian battle strategy. All wings. Stay tight, Hyun Woo transmitted as anti-fighter fire filled the space around them. We only get one run at this. The fighters wove through the maze of capital ships, dodging plasma fire and missile strikes. Hyun-woo watched as 3 of his wingmates were hit and destroyed, their ships exploding in brief flashes of light. Almost there, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Almost there. The Vrexian command ship loomed ahead, a mountain of metal bristling with weapons. It seemed impossible that a handful of small fighters could hurt something so large, but the humans had learned that impossible just meant difficult. Fire everything, Hyun-woo ordered. The fighters launched their missiles simultaneously, over 100 weapons streaking toward the command ship's shield generator. The Vrexians tried to shoot them down, but there were too many coming too fast. The missiles hit, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the command ship's shields flickered and failed. Its main sensor array exploded. Debris scattered into space. That's for everyone we've lost, Hyun-woo said quietly, pulling his fighter into a tight turn and racing away from the crippled vessel. On the bridge of his flagship, Thulrax watched his command network collapse. Without the coordination from the command ship, his fleet's careful formation began to fall apart. Ships collided with each other. Orders were confused or contradicted. Restore communications, Thulrax roared at his officers. Get our fleet back under control, but it was too late. The Allied fleet had recognized the opportunity and pressed their advantage. Captain Sungmin brought the Relentless into point-blank range and fired the frequency weapon at full power, collapsing the shields on 17 Vrexian ships at once. The other Allied vessels immediately destroyed the defenseless targets. The battle raged for 9 hours. Ships exploded on both sides, filling space with debris and fire. The Indomitable took hit after hit. Its hull breached in a dozen places. Day One worked miracles keeping the ship functional, routing power around damaged systems, sealing breaches with whatever materials he could find. Captain, Hana reported, her voice strained. We've lost the starboard weapons array. Shields are at 20%. Hull integrity is critical. How many Vrexian ships are left? Taemin asked. Hana checked her console. 76 still in fighting condition. We have 94 Allied ships operational. They were winning. Despite the odds, despite the losses, they were actually winning. Thulrax came to the same realization. His fleet, the pride of the Vrexian Empire, was being destroyed by these impossible humans and their allies. These species that should have accepted subjugation with gratitude were instead tearing his ships apart. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme Commander Thulrax knew fear. Retreat, he ordered. All ships fall back to the planet's defensive grid. But Fleet Admiral Jae-sung wasn't allowing escape. All ships pursue. Don't let them regroup. The Allied fleet chased the retreating Vrexians toward their homeworld. The planet's orbital defenses activated, massive weapons platforms that had protected the Vrexian homeworld for centuries. But even these proved vulnerable to the frequency weapons. The final stand happened in orbit above the Vrexian capital city. The last 50 Vrexian warships formed a defensive sphere around their command center, determined to protect their home at any cost. Private Jiwon Yoon, recovered from her wounds from the boarding action, led another team of Marines. This time their target was the Planetary Defense Control Center on the surface. The dropships fell through the atmosphere under heavy fire. 2 were shot down before they reached the ground. Jiwon's ship crash-landed near the control center, its hull scarred and smoking. "Move, move, move!" Jiwon shouted, leading her Marines out of the wreckage. The Vrexian ground forces were waiting. The battle on the planet's surface was even more brutal than the space combat. Jiwon's team fought building by building, corridor by corridor, against Vrexian warriors defending their home. But the humans wouldn't stop. Even when wounded, even when their ammunition ran low, they kept advancing. The Vrexians fought with courage, but the humans fought with something beyond courage. They fought with the memory of every human colony that had been threatened, every ship that had been destroyed, every friend who had died. Jiwon reached the Defense Control Center with 12 Marines left from her original 40. She placed charges on the massive doors and blew them open. Inside, the Vrexian commander of the defense grid stood with his officers. He was an old warrior, his scales scarred from 100 battles. He looked at Jiwon and her small band of humans and spoke in his own language. "The TR,